Hello, and welcome to the Journeys of Folco Hornblower, the One Ring 2nd Edition Strider Mode adventure, written and narrated by me, Ryan Hewlett. Book 3, Chapter 3. Folco followed Elrond up the stone steps to the upper rooms of the main house, feeling the now sudden looks of some of the other elves that occupied the building, looks of amazement and curiosity. Elrond hadn't said a word or acknowledged any presence in stepping away from the table downstairs, intent on reaching wherever he was headed, in haste. What was it about the ring that troubled Elrond so? Folco wondered. Past the first and onto the second floor, Elrond led Folco through a common room in the center, the high ceiling supported by elaborately carved wooden beams, and into the chamber that would be the library and map room, the depository of knowledge collected through the ages. Folco stood in amazement and wonder, never before seeing such a repository of books, scrolls, maps, and the like. Elrond continued to show no signs Folco was there, intent on searching for something within the shelves along the walls. Folco stood at the entrance to the library, patiently waiting for anything from Elrond that would tell Folco why they were there. Elrond pulled out a fairly large tome, elaborately decorated with seemingly gold and silver filigree, nothing of the likes Folco had ever seen. Elrond moved over to the wooden table in the center of the room and motioned for Folco to sit. Folco obliged. There was a time before your kin dug into the hole of Bree, a time before the Shire was given, a time when Elven and Dwarven kingdoms shared a common love for craft, a time when the darkness had not yet blanketed this land. Elrond stood now next to Folco and laid the Elvish tome on the table, in clear view for Folco. Opening it, and although Folco could not read it, recognized it for what it was, Elvish script. Elrond flipped through the pages, landing on a page showing an illustration of a great city along a river with mountains in the distance. Elrond continued. My people built the city of Ost-in-Edhil on the river Saronan. The kingdom was Eregion, ruled by Celebrimbor. Elrond continued to flip through the pages of the tome. Folco focused fixed on the art and elegantly written word of the work. Elrond stopped at a drawing of elf artisans, 3 in fact, 2 male and 1 female. Celebrimbor was the greatest artisan of our time, second only to Fëanor, his grandfather. Elrond pointed to the center figure. Nethig, Elrond now pointing to the elf woman to Celebrimbor's left, was an artificer, a jewel smith under Celebrimbor. It is told she crafted wings of mithril, of swan feather, to soar in the sky with the birds she so dearly loved. Before pointing to the next figure, to Celebrimbor's right, Elrond paused, and Folco noticed hesitation. The male-looking figure was tall, fair, and dressed in white garments. And this was Annatar, emissary of the Valar, who taught Celebrimbor and the other elvish artificers the skill and craft of ring-making. Elrond closed the book hard and sudden. Folco jumped back in surprise. Elrond placed it back into the shelf where he found and taken it, then proceeded to the room entrance. Come with me, he bid to Folco. Folco again responded with haste, quickly jumping out of the chair and following Elrond. As he had led to a large room, glass windows showing a panoramic view of the outside, with chairs, tables, and finely crafted marble chess set in front of a center large window. Elrond bid him to sit in one of the chairs, Elrond sitting down opposite Folco. Your ring was crafted by Nethig, more than 4,500 years ago, in Ost-in-Edhil. Nethig, her fate was sealed before the fall of Eregion, to the enemy, before... Elrond paused again, now looking out past into the darkness of the night, and although Folco could not see it in his overall appearance, Elrond's eyes showed an old pain that seemed to have lingered for what some would call an eternity. Elrond continued. Before a host of elves in alliance with Numenor drove the enemy out of Eriador and back to Mordor. Elrond paused and looked over to Folco. It is commonly told that Nethig was slain during the War of the Elves and the enemy, but that, Folco, is not the entirety of her tale. Elrond stood and walked over to the chess set. Falco now paid a little attention to it, and noticed that pieces seemed to have been already in play. Falco not sure what Elrond was doing, as he moved one of the gaming pieces along the table and in place. Falco, now wondering if he should say something or not, spoke anyway, to break the silence. "Ah, so Nethig crafted this ring, and she wasn't slain in the War of the Elves, and you said the enemy? Who is this enemy you speak of?" Falco had no idea who the enemy was, but he assumed it was very bad, especially if a host, however big a host was, waged a war against the elves. Elrond, without looking at Falco, responded, "I will not utter his name here, nor speak it, as it would cast a dark shadow across this land. The dark speech of Mordor has not been uttered here, nor shall it." Elrond stared at the chess pieces, his hands now tucked behind his back. He continued, "Nethig, yes. Love she had for another, some say even Celebrimbor himself. But I do not think so. When the enemy came to Eregion, in disguise, he tried to persuade Nethig to share her secrets with him. She refused, and the enemy grew wroth." Elrond turned around to now face Falco. "Nethig liked to walk alone within the forest of Swanfleet, and a poisonous serpent stung her with its fangs. She did not heal like our kin healed, for the poison was wrought with malice and cruelty." Elrond walked to the view valley once again. Falco stood and peered out as well into the starry night, and the now lantern-lit buildings of Rivendell. Falco again noticed that faint glow of whitish light emanating all throughout. She was given a choice all our kin must make, to go to the west over the sea, to the undying lands, or she could abandon her body and send her spirit winging west to the halls of Mandor, to wait out the world. Elrond looked down at Falco, Falco now looking up at Elrond. What happened to her? Falco now looking down at the silvery ring. She chose neither, Master Hornblower. Elrond now looked back onto the valley. She loved the lands of Middle-earth more than she loved her life itself. In complete desperation, she forged another ring, the bearer to fall into an enchanted slumber and remain untouched by all time. She was found in the Swanfleet and placed on a bier, and a palace was built where she would now rest, until a time one could heal her. Elrond now stopped. His eyes were lost in the darkness of the valley below. "You must find Nethig's resting place, for that is the only way to rid yourself of the shadow that encompasses the ring. And now, your mind and heart." Elrond now staring at Falco intently. Falco felt the gaze of Elrond deep within his mind. Although he didn't think elves could read one's thoughts, Falco made sure not to think anything unkindly of Elrond, or elves in general for that matter. Falco took in a deep breath, opened his mouth, then closed it, giving an expression of confusion. Where would one find this palace, this place where Nethig rests? Falco now with enough courage to ask. That we will discuss tomorrow. Elrond now turned and walked out to the common communal space just outside the solar room. Falco followed. Now standing outside of the entrance stood a beautiful young elf maiden. She bowed before Falco. Falco lost for any words, awestruck with her timeless beauty, like a carefully planted garden in full bloom. Falco bowed in return. "Arwen will now take you to your room." Elrond bowed his head and left down past the library, where Falco previously had been, and down a flight of stairs and out of sight. Falco was still awestruck with Arwen. Never before had he been graced with such beauty. Arwen stepped back and waved Falco to follow her. "Come with me, Master Hornblower." Falco followed, and Arwen led Falco down the same flight of steps as Elrond had taken, and onto the second floor. Guiding him to the guest room, Falco could scarcely believe what he saw. Unlike the Prancing Pony, Woodhall, even Brandy Hall or Bag End itself could compare, Falco thought it kingly in its decoration and setting. "My father and I hope you find this suiting to your needs." Falco nodded, still lost for words. Arwen smiled. "Rivendell is open to all my father bids welcome. May you rest with peace." With that, Arwen spoke an elvish greeting of good night, and as Falco watched her leave and back up to the stairs to the upper floors, he finally had the courage to say, "Good night," in response. The morning air was crisp but sweet, and Folco heard the wind rustling through the trees making up the Rivendell, and the flowing waters of the Bruin and below, and the falls nearest to the main house of Elrond. The sun shone brightly, and as Falco peered out to the open archway and onto the railed balcony of his room, the full splendor and wonder of Rivendell was in full view. Falco was lost for words, taking it all in, placing it into the deep recesses of his memory, so as to never forget. Without knowing it, his traveling wear was now hanging, clean and well tended. He didn't remember waking up and giving his garments to anyone either last night, or early morning, but there they were, nonetheless. Although nice, Falco didn't care much for the sleep garments that were given to him, but wondered how they already had hobbit-sized garments. May it have been Bilbo's visit to Rivendell those many years ago, and since, that the elves made such garments in case another hobbit chanced to visit? Either way, Falco would ask the next elf he saw, if other of his kin had visited Rivendell before. Falco changed into his clothes and walked out into the communal space. The sweet smell of incense permeated the air, the soft sound of singing coming from the other side of the hall. The sound was attractive, his sense of wonder now of where and who had been singing it. He went to the stairwell and heard it coming from downstairs. He saw no others, elf or otherwise. Where he stood, the sound now seemingly coming from past the entrance hall, with the dormer lantern, the eastern porch of the main house. Falco slowly walked out, and to his surprise no one was there. Falco saw the full grandeur of the valley, however before his eyes, the transition of summer to autumn, now almost fully complete. The pines still a deep green, the oaks and beech now showing the ranges of yellows, oranges, and reds. Walking past followed the course of the now loud flowing waters of the Bruin, heading off into unknown areas of the mountains, surrounding, and to the trees themselves. I hope your night was restful. Falco lost in the splendor of the view, not realizing Elrond had entered the space. Surprised, but calmly, Falco replied, "Very much so. If I were to stay here for the rest of my life, I dare I'd be quite content, Master Elrond. The valley is always open to friends of the free peoples of Middle-earth. Come, let us eat, and I will tell you what you need to know about your ring, and where you should look to find Nethig's resting place." Elrond now gesturing to Falco to the side door, and into the great hall, to feast once again on the bounty of the valley below. After a hearty breakfast, to Elvish standards, Elrond called for tea. Sitting back and folding his hands together, he spoke. "The final resting place of Nethig I do not know. The maiden road of Eregion is all but lost to the ravages of time, and the forest for which she walked is now but a mire. Perhaps the elders of Medcot may know of what palace that now would lie hidden below the mire." An elf maiden brought in freshly brewed herbal tea and poured both Elrond and Falco cups, leaving the pot in between them. Elrond continued, "It is too late for you now to travel to Swanfleet, but when the flowers of spring begin to blossom, make your way to Tharbad, and then find passage to Swanfleet. Medcot lies there. From there you are on your own in finding the palace and Nethig's resting place." Falco, with his cup in hand, taking a sip of the tea, laid it back down on the table. "Thank you, Lord Elrond, for your counsel, and your hospitality. It is most graciously welcomed." Elrond nodded his head in thanks. He raised his hand, Falco not noticing an elven steward bringing a number of items with him. Laying down on the table between Falco and Elrond, now rested a bottle of what Falco thought was fine elvish wine he had tasted the evening before, a cylindrical, leather-bound case, as well as a handful of small, opaque glass vials protected by straps of leather. Elrond picked up the bottle and handed it over to Falco. "As requested, for your parents, the best of our wines." Falco's face now flushed, smiled, nodded, and his voice crackled as he said, "Thank you." He handed the 2 vials. "This is Mirivor, and it will serve you well on your journeys, should you need it." Elrond proceeded to explain of its uses, one of a medicinal tonic for the expedited healing of wounds, the other to give clarity of mind and thought when needed for difficult tasks. Finally, Elrond handed Falco the case, smiling. Luckily for Bilbo, you succeeded on your task given to you from him. Here is what he requested. He shall be most pleased of your return, I am sure." Falco laughed. "Well, yes, I'm sure he will." Falco now wished he had something to give in return, and then he remembered. He quickly stood, Elrond surprised at the sudden movement. "Wait, I have something to give in return." Off Falco went. Elrond raised his eyebrow, intrigued. Moments passed and Falco returned, now with a large smile on his face. Sitting down and resting his handkerchief on the table between them, Falco began to unwrap it. Elrond watched in curiosity. Falco carefully opened up the handkerchief, and to Elrond's surprise, Falco presented the Athelas plant he took from his journey to Rivendell. Elrond now looked at Falco in a form of amazement. Elrond graciously accepted the offering. "Athelas is quite a potent healing herb. This is most welcome. As for your stay in Rivendell, stay as long as you wish. You are amongst friends here." Falco nodded. "Thank you for the gracious offer. I would like to get back to Bree and possibly onto the Shire to deliver this to Bilbo before the snow comes. If I leave tomorrow, I believe I could make it. If all goes well, yes, I believe I could." Elrond nodded his head in response. "Very well then. We will make sure you have enough provisions to last you on your return. And I'll send a party out with you to ford of Bruin. The Great East Road is more dangerous now than it has been in some time. You must ever be watchful. Speaking of which, can you tell me more about trolls?" Falco asked. "As I mentioned before, I saw one on my way here. Fortunately, I had my wits about me and was able to keep out of sight. But if by chance I'm surprised by one, or come across its hole, what does one do?" Elrond without hesitation responded. "It is best for you not to engage with a troll, alone. They are tough as the rocks of the mountain. If you do, remember they are not as intelligent as you. They can tend to be distracted very easily, and from what you described, stone trolls turn to stone in sunlight. If you happen on one, hope it is close to the dawn when that happens." Falco sat back and smiled. "Yes, well, that's exactly what I thought. Stay away. I'll make sure to stay on the south side of the road until the last bridge. Yes, that's what I'll do." Elrond went about his day, with Falco spending the day visiting with Billy in the stables and taking in what could the awe and wonder that was Rivendell. Billy was quite content with where he was, and Falco worried that he wouldn't leave forever. Walking across the bridge, Billy now in tow, and guided by the elves on horseback, dressed in elven battle wear, each carrying an elvish spear, bow, and sword to the side, Falco turned to once again seeing the buildings of Rivendell. Hopefully not for the last time. Elrond was on the steps of the front porch and held up his hand. Falco waved in response. Off they went, the unlikeliest of a trio, Falco thought, to leave Rivendell and out into the valley. The day was cool, but dry, the sky sunny with the occasional cloud breaking up the slight warmth of the sun. Winter would soon set in a number of weeks, but Falco hoped he could be home in Bree before the first flake of snow would fall. The provisions he received from Rivendell surely would last him the journey, if not for a month or more, and Falco's skill to hunt and forage would easily extend any of his rations. His worry wasn't food, nor finding place to camp. His worry was the troll, of what happened to the dwarves, and although he didn't let on that he would to Elrond, he did want to check out that troll hole, his hobbit-like curiosity now getting the better of him. Crossing the ford of Bruin, Falco bid farewell to his elvish guard, and they quickly turned back toward the path to Rivendell. The sun set further down in the western horizon, and Falco, not wanting to travel any further, looked for an appropriate place to camp, safe away from the rushing waters of the Bruin and off the Great East Road. We'll continue the journeys of Folco Hornblower next time. If you like the story and the content I'm creating, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Check out the other videos I'm creating called Riddles in the Dark, as I attempt to learn and describe the rules of the One Ring RPG for new players and old of the game. Again, thank you for watching. Cheers.